Margaret, I found a wonderful nursing home for you called Sunset Gardens. The moving truck comes Monday at 10 a.m., my daughter-in-law Jessica announced at my 83rd birthday dinner, slicing her salmon like she was performing surgery. I smiled sweetly and calmly reached for my water glass. What I did next would wipe that smug look off her face forever. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Because, honey, you're about to witness the most satisfying takedown in family drama history. Now, Jessica has been treating me like I'm some senile old bat for months. Always speaking slowly, making decisions without asking, and, my personal favorite, explaining how to use my own coffee maker. The woman actually thinks I'm losing my marbles. If only she knew how sharp these marbles really are. I've already packed your essentials, she continued, not even looking up from her plate. The audacity was almost impressive. Almost. My son Marcus, God bless his spineless soul, just sat there staring at his mashed potatoes like they held the meaning of life. 35 years old and still scared of his wife. I clearly failed somewhere in his upbringing. That's very thoughtful of you. Jessica, I said, keeping my voice as sweet as pie. Inside, I was calculating exactly how this little power play was about to explode in her face. You see, there's something about me that Jessica never bothered to learn. And trust me, that oversight is going to cost her everything. I know it's hard, Jessica said with fake sympathy that would make a soap opera actress cringe. But Marcus and I can finally convert your room into the home office we desperately need. There it was. The truth slipping out like ketchup from a squeeze bottle. This wasn't about my well-being. This was about real estate. Their real estate, or so they thought. Will I be able to take my jewelry? I asked innocently, playing the confused grandmother role she expected. Oh, we'll keep those safe for you, Jessica said quickly. Too quickly. No point risking theft in a place like that. I nodded like the sweet, gullible old lady she thought I was. Of course, dear. How silly of me to worry. But here's what Jessica didn't know, and what Marcus had conveniently forgotten in his eagerness to please his wife. This house isn't in his name. Never was. When my husband died 5 years ago, everything went directly to me. Every brick, every board, every dollar. And tomorrow morning, Princess Jessica is going to get an education in property law that'll knock her designer socks clean off. I think I'll turn in early, I said, standing slowly and adding a little tremble to my hands for effect. Big day tomorrow. Yes, it certainly is, Jessica smiled, probably already measuring my bedroom for her new desk. As I climbed the stairs, I heard her on the phone, finally getting rid of the old bag tomorrow. That house is worth a fortune, and she's too out of it to even know what she owns. Oh, sweetie, if only you knew how wrong you are about this particular old bag. I went to my room and pulled out my address book, the real one, not the fake, confused old lady version I let Jessica see. Time to make a call that would change everything. Theodore Hayes, my lawyer and poker buddy for 20 years, answered on the first ring. Ted, I said, remember how you always said I should stand up for myself more? Well, I need eviction papers drawn up. Tonight. Margaret, what's happening? Someone just made the mistake of thinking they could outsmart a woman who's been playing chess while they're still learning checkers. I woke up to the delightful sound of my furniture being moved around downstairs. Apparently, Jessica had decided to start redecorating before the nursing home van even arrived. The sheer nerve was almost admirable, if it weren't so incredibly stupid. I found her in my living room, directing 2 confused-looking moving men, like she was some sort of household general. Careful with that china cabinet, she was barking. It's probably worth more than both your salaries combined. Charming as always, that one. Good morning, Jessica, I said pleasantly, shuffling down in my bathrobe and slippers. Starting early, I see. She jumped like a cat with its tail caught in a door. Oh, Margaret, I was just organizing things for you. Moving can be so overwhelming at your age. Right, because nothing says organizing like having strange men wrap up my belongings while I sleep. I've seen mob hits with more courtesy. How thoughtful, I replied, playing up the frail old lady act. But I'm afraid there's been a tiny change of plans. The moving men stopped mid-rap. Jessica's face went from fake sweet to genuinely confused faster than a mood ring in a freezer. What kind of change? She asked, and I could practically hear the dollar signs crashing in her head. I pulled out the envelope Theodore had delivered at dawn and handed it to her with a grandmother smile that could melt butter. Just a little legal matter we need to clear up first. Jessica opened the papers, and I watched her face go through more changes than a traffic light. Confusion, disbelief, then pure white-hot panic. "These are eviction papers," she whispered, like saying it quietly would make it less true. 24 hours, I confirmed cheerfully. Noon tomorrow, to be exact. One of the moving men cleared his throat. "Ma'am, if there's a property dispute, we can't proceed with any relocations." "Oh, there's no dispute," I said sweetly. "The house belongs to me, has for 40 years. These gentlemen are free to go." Jessica's mask finally slipped completely. "You can't do this. This house should belong to Marcus. You're just a confused old woman who doesn't understand." "Actually," I interrupted, "I understand perfectly. I understand that you've been planning to steal my house, ship me off to die in a nursing home, and redecorate my bedroom before my side of the bed is even cold." The moving men were already packing up their equipment. Smart guys. They could smell a family explosion coming and wanted to be in the next county when it hit. "You're making a huge mistake," Jessica hissed, her sweet act completely gone now. "Marcus won't stand for this." "Marcus," I said, settling into my favorite chair like I was watching a show, "doesn't own this house, never has, and unless he's planning to support your broke behind somewhere else, I suggest you start packing." That's when Jessica played her trump card. "I'm calling social services. You're clearly not competent to make these kinds of decisions." I smiled. "Oh, honey, you have no idea what you just walked into." "What an interesting idea," I said. "I think that's exactly what we should do." Jessica returned 3 hours later with what looked like a small army of official-looking people. I watched through my window as she strutted up my walkway like she owned the place, flanked by a man in an expensive suit, a woman with a clipboard, and another woman who was clearly trying very hard to look medical and professional. The doorbell rang, and I took my sweet time answering it. No point in rushing to my own ambush. "Margaret," Jessica called through the door, "I brought some people who need to speak with you about your situation." I opened the door wearing my favorite cardigan and my most innocent grandmother expression. "How wonderful. I do love visitors." "This is my attorney, Mr. Davidson," Jessica announced with renewed confidence, "and Dr. Patricia Mills, who specializes in mental competency evaluations." The third woman stepped forward. "I'm Sandra Chen with Adult Protective Services." "My goodness," I said, ushering them into my living room. "This is quite the welcoming committee. Should I put on tea?" Jessica was practically vibrating with smugness. "Margaret, we're here because your behavior today suggests you may not be capable of making sound decisions about your living situation." "How thoughtful of you to be concerned," I replied, settling into my chair. "Dr. Mills, was it? I'd be happy to answer any questions about my mental state." Dr. Mills pulled out a clipboard and put on what I'm sure she thought was a professional expression. "Mrs. Thompson, can you tell me what year it is?" 2024, I answered promptly. "And who is the current president?" "Joe Biden. Though I imagine that could change depending on when you're watching this video." She made notes. "Can you count backwards from 100 by sevens?" I could, but I'd rather not waste everyone's time with math when we have more pressing matters to discuss. I stood up and walked to my desk, pulling out a folder I'd prepared while Jessica was gathering her little circus. "Since we're all here discussing my mental competency," I said, spreading papers across my coffee table, "perhaps Jessica could help me understand these documents?" The room went dead quiet as I laid out bank statements, credit card bills, and a few other choice pieces of evidence I'd been collecting. "For instance," I continued conversationally, "could you explain to Dr. Mills why there are charges on my credit cards for a spa weekend in Boston that I definitely didn't take?" Jessica's face went white as fresh snow. "Or perhaps Mr. Davidson could clarify the legal implications of opening credit accounts in someone else's name without their knowledge or consent." The fake lawyer was already backing toward the door. "Oh, and Dr. Mills," I said, turning to the actress with the clipboard, "since you're evaluating my mental state, maybe you could tell everyone how much Jessica paid you for this little performance. Because according to my research, you're actually Patricia Miller from the Springfield Community Theater, not a doctor at all." The room exploded into chaos as the fake professionals scrambled for the exit, but Sandra Chen stayed behind, furiously taking notes. "Ms. Thompson," she said to Jessica, "did you just attempt to use actors to falsify a mental competency evaluation?" Jessica's mouth opened and closed like a fish, gasping for air. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is when things got really interesting. "I can explain everything," Jessica stammered. But Sandra Chen was already writing what looked like a novel on her clipboard. "Ma'am, Staging a false mental competency evaluation is fraud, Sandra said, especially when it involves a vulnerable adult. I almost felt bad for Jessica. Almost. But then I remembered her measuring my bedroom for office furniture, and the feeling passed faster than gas through a goose. Oh, but there's more, I said, opening another section of my folder like I was revealing a prize on a game show. Jessica, would you like to tell Sandra about these interesting charges I found on my credit cards? I spread out 3 credit card statements, all in my name, all with purchases I'd never made. Nordstrom, Saks Fifth Avenue, that fancy spa in Boston. Either I've developed a serious shopping addiction along with my supposed mental decline, or someone's been having quite the spending spree on my dime. Jessica looked like she'd swallowed a live toad. Those aren't... I was just using my identity to fund your lifestyle? I finished helpfully. Because that's what we call identity theft, dear. Sandra was scribbling so fast I thought her pen might catch fire. Mrs. Thompson, are you saying your daughter-in-law has been making fraudulent purchases using your personal information? That's exactly what I'm saying. And I have documentation going back 6 months. Just then, Marcus walked in looking like a man who'd aged a decade overnight. Mom, what's going on? Jessica called me crying about police and fraud charges? Poor boy. Still had no idea his wife was a criminal mastermind. Well, criminal anyway. The mastermind part was debatable. Marcus, I said gently, did you know your wife has been using my credit cards without permission? What? No, Jessica. What is she talking about? That's when Jessica broke down completely. And I mean completely. Ugly crying, snot bubbles, the whole dramatic production. I was trying to help us, she sobbed. You lost your job 8 months ago and we were drowning. I thought I could pay it back before anyone noticed. The room went so quiet you could hear a pin drop in the next county. Marcus looked like someone had hit him with a baseball bat made of truth. You lost your job? I asked quietly. 8 months ago? Marcus couldn't meet my eyes. I was going to tell you, Mom. Things just kept getting worse, and Jessica said we could handle it without involving you. By stealing from me? I didn't know about the credit cards. I swear I didn't know. And you know what? I believed him. Marcus had many faults. He was weak, easily led, and apparently couldn't hold a job to save his life, but outright theft wasn't in his DNA. Being married to a thief, however, apparently was. Sandra cleared her throat. Mrs. Thompson, do you want to press charges for identity theft and fraud? I looked at Jessica, still crying like someone had canceled Christmas. Then I looked at my son, who looked like his entire world was crumbling around him like a house of cards in a hurricane. That depends, I said slowly, on whether Jessica is willing to make some things right. But what I was really thinking was, oh, honey, if you think this is bad, wait until you see what else I've discovered about your little schemes. Jessica looked up at me with mascara running down her cheeks like black rivers of regret. What do you want me to do? First, I said, settling back in my chair like a judge about to pass sentence. You're going to call every single family member you've been telling that I'm losing my mind. You're going to explain that you lied. Margaret, I'm not finished, sweetie. Second, you're going to provide me with documentation of every fraudulent charge you made on my accounts. Third, you're moving out of my house. Today? Marcus squeaked. Mom, we don't have anywhere to go. Should have thought of that before you let your wife turn me into her personal ATM, I replied cheerfully. Sandra was still scribbling notes like she was documenting the fall of Rome. Mrs. Thompson, even if you choose not to press charges, I'm required to file a report about this incident. I understand completely, I said, and I appreciate your thoroughness. Jessica wiped her eyes and tried one last manipulation. Margaret, I know you're angry, but we're family. Family doesn't throw family out on the street. I actually laughed. The sheer audacity was breathtaking. Family doesn't research nursing homes to dump family members either, but here we are. I wasn't researching, Jessica started, then stopped as she realized what she'd almost admitted. Weren't you? I asked innocently. Because I have your browser history right here. I pulled out another sheet of paper from my magical folder of Jessica's sins. Let's see. Average life expectancy nursing home residents. Estate transfer upon death, Massachusetts. How to become power of attorney for elderly relative. Should I go on? The room went dead silent. Marcus looked like he was going to be sick. Mom, he whispered, what is she talking about? Your wife wasn't just planning to steal my house. Son, she was planning my death, or at least hoping for it and preparing for it. Jessica jumped up like her chair had caught fire. That's not true. I was just researching options. Options for what exactly? I asked sweetly. My demise? Sandra looked up from her notes. Ma'am, are you saying she was planning to harm you? I'm saying she was researching how long it would take for me to die in a nursing home and what would happen to my money when I did. Draw your own conclusions. Marcus stood up so fast his chair fell over. Jessica, please tell me this isn't true. Jessica's silence was more damning than any confession. Get out, I said quietly. Both of you. Now. Mom, please, Marcus started. Now! They left, Jessica still crying and Marcus looking like a man walking to his own execution. I locked the door behind them and immediately called Theodore. Ted, I need a security system installed. Today. Cameras, alarms, the works. Margaret, should I call the police? Not yet, but soon. Very soon. Because if Jessica thought she could plan my death and get away with it, she was about to learn that this old lady had a few tricks left up her sleeve. The security system was installed by evening. I now had cameras covering every entrance, motion sensors in every room, and a panic button that would summon half the police department. Theodore had connections that made things happen when they needed to happen. I was testing the doorbell camera when it chimed. The screen showed Jessica and Marcus on my porch, along with two people I didn't recognize, a woman with graying hair who looked like Jessica with 20 extra years of bitterness, and a man who looked embarrassed to be there. I opened the door but kept the chain latched. No point in making this easy for them. What do you want, Jessica? Margaret, please, Jessica said, trying to sound reasonable. I brought my mother and my brother. They want to help us work this out as a family. I looked at the two strangers. Jessica's mother had the same calculating eyes as her daughter. The brother looked like he'd rather be anywhere else on earth. And what exactly did you tell them about our little situation? I asked. The truth, Jessica's mother said, before Jessica could answer. That you're trying to destroy my daughter's marriage over a misunderstanding. I burst out laughing. Actually laughed out loud. A misunderstanding? Is that what we're calling identity theft and death planning these days? The brother's eyes went wide. Death planning? Jessica, what the hell is she talking about? She's confused, Jessica said quickly. She's been having memory problems and… Oh, for crying out loud, I interrupted. I have everything documented, Jessica. Your browser history, your credit card fraud, your research into my life expectancy. Stop lying to your family. Margaret, Jessica's mother said in the most condescending tone I'd heard since my last doctor's visit. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Jessica told me you've been having some mental health issues. I turned to the brother. What's your name, dear? David, he said, looking increasingly uncomfortable. David, your sister has stolen my identity to rack up $15,000 in debt, forged legal documents, and researched how long it would take for me to die in a nursing home. Does that sound like a misunderstanding to you? David turned to Jessica with a look that could have melted steel. Please tell me she's lying. Jessica's silence spoke volumes. Oh my God, David said. Jessica, what have you done? Jessica's mother was still trying to defend her darling daughter. I'm sure there's an explanation. There is, I said pleasantly. The explanation is that your daughter is a criminal who was planning to rob me blind and possibly arrange for my convenient death. The only misunderstanding here is that she thought I was too old and confused to figure it out. Marcus finally spoke up. She's telling the truth. Jessica confessed to everything this afternoon. I watched Jessica's mother deflate like a punctured balloon. Jessica, please tell me this isn't true. I was trying to help us survive, Jessica said weakly. We were drowning, and Margaret has more money than she knows what to do with. So you decided to steal it? David asked incredulously. And plan her death? I wasn't planning anyone's death. No, I said. You were just hoping for it and preparing for it. Much better. David looked sick. I can't be part of this. He turned to me. Ma'am, I'm sorry. I had no idea what kind of person my sister had become. He walked away, leaving Jessica's mother standing there looking like she'd aged 20 years in 10 minutes. And that's when things got really interesting. Jessica's mother made one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation. Margaret, surely we can work something out that doesn't involve destroying Jessica's entire life. Her life? I said, genuinely amazed at the woman's audacity. She was planning to destroy mine. But you're fine, the woman said, as if that made everything peachy keen. Nothing actually happened to you. I stared at this woman who had clearly raised a daughter with the moral compass of a broken shopping cart wheel. Nothing happened to me because I was smart enough to catch her before she could finish. If I'd been the confused old lady she thought I was, I'd be in a nursing home right now waiting to die while she redecorated my house. What would it take for you to forgive and forget? Jessica's mother asked. Jessica's mother. We could pay you back. With what money? Your daughter is broke, remember? That's when Theodore appeared in my driveway with 2 police officers. Perfect timing, as always. Mrs. Thompson, one of the officers said, we understand you want to file a report about identity theft and fraud? And conspiracy, I added. Don't forget the conspiracy part. Jessica went white as fresh paint. It wasn't conspiracy. I never actually tried to hurt anyone. Ma'am, the officer said patiently, researching someone's death and taking steps to profit from it constitutes conspiracy to commit murder, regardless of whether you carried it out. Jessica's mother started crying. Marcus looked like he wanted to disappear into the earth, and Jessica just stood there staring at the handcuffs on the officer's belt like she was seeing her future. Jessica Thompson, the officer said, you're under arrest for identity theft, fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder. As they read Jessica her rights and cuffed her, she turned to me with genuine terror in her eyes. Margaret, please. I have a daughter in college. If I go to prison, her life will be ruined. For just a moment, I felt a twinge of sympathy. Just a moment. Then I remembered her researching my death like she was planning a vacation. You should have thought about your daughter before you decided to become a criminal, I said. Actions have consequences, Jessica. Time to face yours. They put her in the police car while her mother sobbed on my lawn, and Marcus stood there looking like his world had ended. Mom, he said as the car disappeared, what happens now? Now? I looked at my son who had disappointed me in every way that mattered. Now you figure out how to live with the choices you made. But I had one more surprise waiting for everyone, because Jessica wasn't the only one who'd been planning ahead. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in Theodore's office reviewing Jessica's plea deal. Her public defender had negotiated 5 years in prison for fraud and identity theft in exchange for dropping the conspiracy charges. What do you think? Theodore asked. I think 5 years gives her plenty of time to think about what she did, I said, and keeps her away from other people's credit cards. The prosecutor says the conspiracy charge would be hard to prove since she never took concrete action. Planning my death wasn't concrete enough? Apparently, researching life expectancy doesn't count as attempted murder in Massachusetts. Who knew? I signed the agreement. Jessica would go to prison, I'd get my money back, and I could move on with my life. It felt like justice, even if it wasn't perfect. Marcus had been calling every day, begging for forgiveness. I'd been ignoring him, but Theodore thought I should at least hear him out. He's been sober for a month, Theodore said. Going to meetings, looking for work. Maybe he's finally ready to grow up. At 35? Better late than never, I suppose. When I got home, Marcus was sitting on my front steps, looking like a man who'd lost everything. Which, I suppose, he had. Mom, please don't call the police. I just want to talk. Against my better judgment, I let him in. We sat in my living room where this whole nightmare had started, and I waited for him to explain himself. I've been going to AA, he said finally. They have this thing about making amends to people you've hurt. I hurt you, Mom. I let Jessica hurt you. And I know sorry isn't enough. You're right. It isn't. I was drunk or hungover for most of the last year. I wasn't thinking clearly about anything. That's an explanation, Marcus, not an excuse. I know. I'm not asking you to excuse what I did. I'm asking for a chance to prove I can be better. I studied my son's face. He looked genuinely remorseful, but desperate people often looked remorseful when they needed something. What exactly are you asking for? A chance to earn your trust back. I'm not asking to move back in or for money. I just want you not to give up on me completely. It was more reasonable than I'd expected, more honest than he'd been in years. And how do you plan to earn my trust back? I don't know yet, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes for however long it takes. I thought about it. Marcus had made terrible choices, but he'd also been manipulated by a master manipulator. Maybe he deserved a chance to prove he could be better. Once a week, I said finally. Dinner, Sunday nights. You stay sober, you get help, you prove you're working on yourself. One slip, one drink, one lie, one missed meeting, and you're out of my life permanently. I understand. And Mom, thank you for not giving up on me. Don't thank me yet. Thank me in a year, if you're still sober. But I didn't tell him about the letter I'd received that morning from Jessica's daughter Emma, because that was a conversation for another day. 6 months later, Marcus had kept his word. Sober, working at a hardware store, going to meetings religiously, we had our Sunday dinners, and slowly, very slowly, I was starting to see glimpses of the son I'd raised instead of the weak man he'd become. It was during one of these dinners that he brought up something that had been weighing on his mind. "Mom, I've been thinking about Emma." Emma was Jessica's 20-year-old daughter, a college junior studying education. I'd met her a few times before everything exploded, and she'd seemed like a sweet girl caught in the middle of her mother's schemes. "What about her?" "She's struggling. With Jessica in prison and no family support, she's working 2 jobs trying to stay in school." "That's unfortunate," I said carefully. "I know how this sounds, but Emma's a good kid. She had nothing to do with what Jessica did." "What exactly are you asking me, Marcus?" "I'm not asking anything. I'm just saying, you have the means to help, and she doesn't deserve to suffer for her mother's crimes." I'd been expecting this conversation. In fact, I'd already had it with Emma herself the week before. She'd called me, crying, to apologize for her mother's behavior. "I had no idea," she'd said. "Mom told me you were getting forgetful and she was helping you. I never imagined she was stealing from you. What did you think when she suddenly had money for expensive clothes and spa weekends?" She said Marcus got a promotion and they were finally doing better financially. I'd believed her. Emma had her mother's intelligence, but none of her calculating coldness. "Marcus," I said, setting down my fork, "what would you say if I told you I've already spoken to Emma?" His eyes widened. "You have?" "She called me last week, wanted to apologize for her mother, and ask if there was anything she could do to help pay back what was stolen." "What did you tell her?" "I told her that her mother's debts weren't her responsibility, but her education, that's different." Marcus looked confused. "What do you mean?" "I mean I'm paying for her senior year, tuition, books, living expenses, everything." "Mom, why?" "Because that girl wants to be a special education teacher. She wants to help children who need extra support. And punishing her for her mother's crimes would make me no better than Jessica." Marcus started crying. Actual tears from my grown son, who rarely showed emotion about anything. "You're a better person than I deserve," he said. "Maybe. But Emma deserves a chance to be better than the family she came from, just like you do." "Does she know?" "She will when she gets the letter tomorrow, along with a check for her tuition." "What did you tell her?" "That kindness isn't inherited, but it can be chosen, and that I believe she'll choose to be kind." The doorbell rang, interrupting our moment. I checked the security camera and saw a young woman with dark hair standing nervously on my porch. "Speaking of Emma," I said, "I think she got the letter early." Emma was crying before I even opened the door. Not the manipulative tears her mother had perfected, but genuine gratitude mixed with overwhelming relief. "Mrs. Thompson," she said through her tears, "I don't know how to thank you." "You can thank me by being the kind of person your mother never was," I said, ushering her inside. "And by never, ever lying to someone who trusts you." Marcus stood up when we entered the living room. "Hello, Emma." "Hi, Marcus." She turned back to me. "Mrs. Thompson, I need you to know something. I found some things in Mom's room when I was packing her belongings." She pulled out a folder and set it on my coffee table. "I think you should see these." Inside were bank statements, credit reports, and legal documents I'd never seen before. But what made my blood run cold was the life insurance policy with my name on it, a policy I'd never signed up for, with Jessica listed as the beneficiary. "She forged your signature," Emma said quietly. "The policy is for $500,000. Marcus went white. "Emma, what are you saying?" "I'm saying Mom wasn't just planning to put Grandma Margaret in a nursing home. She was planning to collect life insurance when she died there." The room went dead silent. Even with everything I'd discovered about Jessica, this was beyond what I'd imagined. "There's more," Emma continued, pulling out a notebook. "I found this hidden in her closet. It's like a journal of everything she was planning." I opened the notebook and read entries that made my skin crawl. Jessica hadn't just been hoping for my death. She'd been researching ways to accelerate it. Medication interactions that could cause heart problems. Accidents that were common in nursing homes. Ways to make death look natural in elderly patients. "She was planning to murder me," I said quietly. "I think so," Emma whispered. "And I think she was planning to use the nursing home to do it." Marcus looked like he was going to be sick. "I need to call the police." "No," I said firmly. "We need to call Theodore first. This changes everything about Jessica's plea deal." But as I reached for the phone, I realized something that chilled me to the bone. Jessica's trial wasn't over. Her sentencing wasn't final, and if this evidence came to light, she'd be looking at life in prison instead of 5 years, which meant she'd have every reason to try to silence the people who could testify against her. "Emma," I said urgently, "does anyone else know you found these documents?" "No, I came straight here." "Good. Marcus, call Theodore now." "Emma, you're staying here tonight. Both of you are." "Why?" Marcus asked. "Because if Jessica finds out what Emma discovered, none of us are safe." As if on cue, my security system chimed. Someone was at my front door. I checked the camera and my heart stopped. It was Jessica's mother, and she wasn't alone. Standing on my porch were Jessica's mother and 2 men I didn't recognize. One was tall and thin, with cold eyes. The other was built like a linebacker and looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Emma," I said quietly, "did you tell anyone you were coming here?" "Just Grandma Carol. I wanted her to know where I was going." Jessica's mother, who was now on my porch with 2 men who definitely weren't social workers. I activated my panic button and called Theodore while Marcus ushered Emma to the back of the house. "Margaret," came Jessica's mother's voice through the door. "I know Emma is in there. We need to talk." "About what?" I called back, stalling for time. "About the lies she's been telling about my daughter." Lies. Right. Because forged life insurance policies and murder journals were just misunderstandings. "I think there's been a mistake," I said sweetly. "Emma didn't tell any lies. She just shared some very interesting documents she found. Those documents are private property. Emma had no right to take them. Through my security camera, I watched one of the men walk around to my back door. The other stayed on the porch, effectively blocking my front exit. My phone buzzed. "Theodore, police on the way. Stay inside. Do not open the door." "Mrs. Thompson," the big man called out, "we just want to talk. Open the door and nobody gets hurt." Nobody gets hurt. Such a polite way to make a threat. "I'm afraid I can't do that," I called back. "I'm an old lady, and strange men at my door make me nervous." "We're not strange men," Jessica's mother said. "This is my brother and my nephew. We're family." Family. The word that had started this whole mess. The sound of breaking glass came from my kitchen. They were coming in whether I invited them or not. "Marcus," I whispered urgently, "take Emma upstairs and lock yourselves in my bedroom. Don't come out until the police arrive." "I'm not leaving you," Marcus said firmly. "Yes, you are. Emma has evidence that could put Jessica away for life. She's more important than an old lady's pride." "Mom, go!" They went. I heard their footsteps on the stairs just as my kitchen door opened. I stood in my living room, all 5 feet 2 inches of me, facing 3 people who had come to silence me permanently. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated what an 83-year-old woman was capable of when she'd had enough. Jessica's mother walked in first, followed by the 2 men. "Margaret, this doesn't have to be difficult." "Oh, but it does," I said pleasantly. "You see, I've spent the last 6 months learning exactly what your daughter is capable of. Did you really think I wouldn't prepare for this possibility?" "What are you talking about?" I smiled. "I'm talking about the cameras recording everything you're doing right now, the police dispatch monitoring my security system, and the very interesting conversation I recorded with Jessica 3 months ago, where she mentioned her family's willingness to help with difficult situations." The big man looked confused. "Ma'am, we're just here to get some documents that don't belong to—" "You're here to intimidate an elderly woman and steal evidence of attempted murder," I corrected, "which, by the way, is being live-streamed to my lawyer's office right now." Jessica's mother went pale. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" I pulled out my phone and showed them the screen. "Live feed to Theodore Hayes, attorney at law. Say hello to the camera, gentlemen." The sound of sirens filled the air. Beautiful, beautiful sirens. "Now," I said as red and blue lights flashed through my windows, "who wants to explain to the police why they broke into my house to steal evidence?" 3 months later, I was sitting in my garden reading a letter from Emma. She'd graduated with honors and gotten a job teaching special needs children at a local elementary school. Jessica was serving 25 to life for conspiracy to commit murder, and her mother was doing 5 years for breaking and entering and intimidation of a witness. Marcus had been sober for a year and was engaged to a lovely woman named Carol who worked at the recovery center. They'd asked me to walk Marcus down the aisle at their wedding. I was going to say yes. "Not bad for a confused old lady," I said to my roses, and meant every word. The moral of this story? Never underestimate a woman who's survived 83 years on this planet. We didn't get this far by being weak, naive, or helpless. and those who try to take advantage of our supposed vulnerability might discover they're playing a very dangerous game with the wrong person. I'm Margaret Thompson. I own my house, control my money, and decide my own fate. At 83, I'm just getting started on the best chapter of my life, and if anyone else wants to try shipping me off to a nursing home, they're welcome to try. But they'd better bring more than fake doctors and forged documents. Because, honey, I've been playing this game longer than they've been breathing, and I always play to win. Thanks for watching. If you liked it, subscribe to help us grow and keep these stories alive.